Welcome to another episode of the Robinson-Hewitt Pod. This is where we talk about the future of technology and what it means to be human in the next era of tech. I'm your host, Alison Mackey. I'm a futurist, anthropologist of emerging technology, and founder of Robinson-Hewitt Consulting. Welcome. So a few episodes ago, where we talked about the future of cities, I mentioned that I have been fantasizing about where in the world I could live next. And I've been mapping out all the different lives I could potentially live out in these different locations. And that kept landing me on the same question. What actually makes a city worth living in, worth contributing to, and worth staying in, as well as worth caring about? And somewhere in the process, I've found myself multiple times thinking about this in a more personal way, thinking about what actually makes something home. And I haven't exactly had the easiest relationship with that word. I've moved quite a lot in my life, and there's been more than one moment where home has just been where every other option has been exhausted. And I know that sentiment can be related to by so many people as well. And every time this has happened or I return somewhere familiar, there's always this feeling of this isn't quite home. But I do have one exception to this, which was my old flat in Ponsonby. And this villa was quite run down and quite old, and I'm pretty sure it gave me mold poisoning. But there was something alive about that place. So it had a rolling lease that went on for years, and it kept getting passed on friend to friend. And each person who moved in had their own stories, their own rituals, their own contributions. And it felt like we were all just adding in our own puzzle pieces to this house. And it felt like somewhere that had its own heartbeat within the walls. And that's the thing. It wasn't home because I loved it. But it was home because it was full of life itself. Beyond the carefully picked out furniture, the spider that made himself home in the corner of my window, or even the neighbor's cat who would crawl through the windows to pester me and my flatmate during the day while we were trying to work. So today we're getting into all of that. The technology, yes, because there is some interesting things happening within that space. The architecture, the smart systems, the way that our homes are starting to behave more like living organisms than just simply static structures. But of course, the bigger question, which we always love, what does it actually take for a place to feel like home? And as the world continuously changes around us, our definitions of family, relationships, work, communities continue to shift. It leaves us with a bigger question of what actually makes a home. So a couple of years ago, while I was reading a biography of one of my favorite artists, it got me thinking about her paintings and what they would have said about her life, because they probably witnessed far more than the biographer could ever understand. And so I wrote an entire short story around this concept, and it came to me as if I had already experienced this entire life within a singular moment. So the story follows a woman and her husband who are almost mythological within their own town. They're electric, glamorous, and slightly notorious for being different than everybody else. And they buy this grand house, and the story captures the wife in her old age as she's grown mad with grief after her husband's passing. And so in this wild state, she opens up her house as a gallery, finally letting people in to see how they lived their extraordinary lives. And so strangers wander through the rooms and speculate how it must have been like to be them. And at the front of the house is this gift shop filled with trinkets and books, and one of the books contains the art collection itself. But instead of essays on the technical pedigree of each piece, the essays are written from the painting's perspectives instead, and each one tells the story of their love as it witnessed it unfold. And I share this because I think it says something true about what a home actually is. It's not the structure itself or how grand a house is, and it's not even about the technology. It's the accumulation of everything that's happened inside it. The stories, the rituals, the people that fall in love with its particular charm, and the life that slowly settled into the walls over time. And that matters right now because we are building an enormous amount of technology into our homes. We have smart systems, AI assistants, ambient sensors, energy networks, automated everything. And the risk is not that the technology is bad, because a lot of it is really helpful and remarkable. But the risk is that we build towards the wrong thing, that we optimize for efficiency and forget to ask whether the place actually feels like somewhere where you actually want to call home. We're also at a point where the definition of home is shifting completely. People are settling down later in life and not in a traditional sense. And more people are starting to live alone. More people are also renting well into their 30s and 40s. And the single family home on the quarter-acre section is no longer the default. And that changes what a home needs to be, not just architecturally, but also socially and emotionally. And I see a lot of futurists talking about declining birth rates, people not settling down and not having children. And there's an undercurrent of catastrophizing running through all of that. And as a single, child-free 33-year-old woman, that rhetoric makes me really uncomfortable because what's happening isn't a failure, but a societal shift, which is natural because people are living differently. They're staying single longer or not partnering at all. We're moving cities and countries and choosing to be a little bit more flexible than permanent. And I think that's in the pursuit of trying to figure out who we are before we settle down. And the housing market, at least in most parts of the world, is not set up for that. It was built for a story that a growing number of people are simply no longer living. There's also a broader demographic shift happening alongside this, where populations are starting to age and families are becoming more and more geographically dispersed. So the question of who looks after those people in the home and how is becoming one of the most pressing design questions of the next few decades. And the anthropological piece within this is that across almost every culture and every era, home has been the unit of belonging. It's where your identity gets formed. It's where we recover and it's where we let our guards down. And when that thing becomes unstable, expensive, or simply doesn't match the life that you're actually living, there's a knock-on effect with everything. And that goes to mental health, on our communities, on how people relate to the places where they live. So this is not just a housing design conversation. But before we get truly into the historical references, I do want to reference one movie that will set us up for where we're going. So a not so obvious reference is the 2012 film called Robot and Frank. It's a really funny and deeply humane film about an aging cat burglar named Frank who's in the early stages of dementia. His son, who lives far away, gets him a household companion robot, and Frank hates it at first, until he realizes that the robot has no moral framework around theft, which is very useful if you happen to be a retired cat burglar who's bored and needs something to reignite his sense of purpose. So they start pulling off heists together. And the reason why I love this film for this episode is that it actually shows something about home technology that is really important for aging societies. So the robot does the laundry and helps around the house and reminds Frank to take his medications. But he's also giving him something to care about again, like a reason to get up in the morning, to plan, to feel capable. And that is what home technology at its best can actually do. It's not truly about optimization here. It's about enabling people to live their lives to the fullest for as long as possible. But the complication in the film is that the robot logs everything, every routine, every outing that they have, and that log becomes evidence for everything that Frank has been doing in terms of more robberies, which is such a clean link to our privacy issues that we have with smart home technology. The same system that will support you is the same system that knows everything about you. And that link isn't going away. But in terms of other references, in the Future of Food episode, I mentioned the Stepford Wives and how they showcase this glamorous and slightly sinister montage of the 1950s and 1960s kitchens. So we had all these gleaming appliances and gadgets designed to make domestic life more efficient. And it was all framed around the idea that a woman's job was to be perfectly perky with a pot roast, ready for her husband to walk in through the door. And the technology was real for that. And the aspiration was also embedded within it. But if I want to take references even further back in time, I want to bring up Chitty Chitty Bang Bang, which is one of my favorite childhood musicals. And the father within it is an inventor, which is perfect for this episode. And he invents this very elaborate mechanical breakfast system. It was made with pulleys, levers, and little train track contraptions where the whole thing was designed to cook sausages and eggs and deliver them on a trolley to the table. And no one needs it. And it was totally absurd, but the children loved it. And it was almost this example of tech for tech's sake. So someone invented something to see if it could just be done. And that's actually where a lot of inventions do come from. They're not from a specific problem to solve, but from the sheer curiosity of what is possible. And we've seen the same pattern through the 80s and 90s and early 2000s within our homes. And we saw this rise of digital versions of every analog object that we could think of. And then Apple came along and compressed all of these different devices into one. And now it sits perfectly in our pocket every day. It's the iPhone, which then opened out again to the iPad. And then people were using iPads as control panels for mesh networks within their homes. And then all of that gets streamlined too. So it's almost like a rubber band effect. We stretch out the technology to find its edges of usefulness and see how far it will go. And then someone comes along, pulls it all back into something elegant and simple. And then it stretches out again. And we saw this pattern with electricity, with computing, and with mobile. And if you saw the episode on ambient AI, I think we're right in the middle of that outward stretch of that right now. So there will probably be a lot of interesting and slightly absurd home technology experiments before someone simplifies it all for us. And then before too long, it will just be in the walls like electricity, invisible and assumed. And architects have been wrestling with a parallel version of this question for over a century, completely separate separate from the technology conversation. What actually makes a place feel good to live in? So the Bauhaus movement believed that spaces we inhabit shape our experiences and our relationships. Brutalism pushed material in a really cool way. Concrete, structure, light. But for me, brutalism only works when it's in contrast with nature. So big lumps of concrete, to me, looks beautiful against a backdrop of nature. To have something alive pushing back against all that rigidity. Otherwise, it tips over into oppression, which we've seen. And that same insight that people don't thrive when they're separated from the natural world is showing up today through design. And I think it's a different language, but the same idea. The homes that will hold up over time, they're the ones that are designed around what people actually need. Okay, so let's take a little look into the future and see what my futuristic insights are telling me. So the clearest shifts are already underway when it comes to homes that are moving from being consumers of resources to being producers. So we have things like solar generation, home batteries, rainwater collection, automated energy management, and the infrastructure for all of this, of course, already exists. But the thing is, it's becoming more accessible. The vision is that a home will participate in an energy ecosystem rather than just drawing from it. So we are in the early days of this, but the trajectory is there. And paired with that is a shift in what smart home technology is actually being designed to do. For a while, that promise was control, and that was to automate everything, monitor everything, optimize everything. But there is a version of a smart home so managed and so efficient, it stops feeling like anywhere you would actually want to be, like a hospital that happens to just have a couch. But to me, the more interesting vision is technology so well integrated you barely notice it. Homes that adapt to you without requiring you to manage them. Ambient AI that adjusts light and temperature and sound, not because you've programmed a routine, but because it's learned what you need at different times of day. So these are predictive systems that notice when something needs attention before it becomes a problem. And this is where technology becomes infrastructure. Quiet, intuitive, and useful. And that then means that the life that's happening within the home gets to stay in the foreground. But the idea that I keep coming back to is that the most significant role technology could play in the home is not about making chores faster. It's about supporting people who are aging, isolated, or living alone. As we said, we have an aging population and our families are becoming more geographically dispersed. And a lot of people are living in homes that are technically fine and experientially empty. A companion AI that learns a person's patterns and keeps them engaged and connected, with an ambient system that notices a change in behavior before it becomes a health crisis. Those are really interesting places to be in. And these are design solutions that we can have right now. And the framework for how to do them with dignity rather than surveillance is the thing that needs the most attention and consensus. But the other shift I find really compelling is what is happening to ownership. So a lot of younger people are not going to own homes in the traditional sense, and not only because of affordability, because who can afford anything right now? And with that, there's a growing interest in models that don't require you to carry everything alone. This is where co-housing comes into play, where you have your own private space, but with shared gardens, kitchens, and costs. So community land trusts, where land is held collectively and the housing on it becomes more affordable long-term. Things like fractional ownership, build-to-rent models designed around what community needs rather than just tenancies. So these are responses to a model of isolated individual ownership that was always going to have limits. And then there's something else that I'm interested in as well, and it connects directly into something I've noticed in my own life. So I live in an apartment on the viaduct, and at some point, without really meaning to, my sense of home has stopped ending within the walls of my apartment. Home started to become my walk to my favorite cafe where they know my order. It became my favorite tree in Albert Park, where I always stop and sit beneath when I need to think. It became the food court at Commercial Bay to pick and choose something new to eat every week. Or it was my favorite cinema around the corner, or the familiar faces that you see often enough to recognize, but you never necessarily know them. So none of these places belong to me, but they are part of what I call home within the landscape of my life. And what makes all of that possible is not one piece of technology. It's the accumulation of all the small things working together. It's having walkable streets, public spaces, local businesses, and connectivity, as well as a Lime scooter when I'm running late. It's the invisible infrastructure that lets people build lives that extend beyond the walls. So perhaps the future of homes is not only about improving what happens inside a house, it may be about making it possible for people to feel at home in places around it too. So let's bring all of this into today's context. So if this is the direction that we want to move in, here's where we actually start. So for architects, developers, and anyone building in this space, the most important shift is to design for how people actually live, not for how homes look within a listing. And I actually read this thread on Our New Zealand recently, and people people were sharing what they wish they included when they were building their homes. And the things that people were most grateful for years later were never actually the expensive finishes. They were the things within the walls itself. So this is the internet cabling, extra power points, or wiring ready for solar and EV charging, as well as ducted heating and cooling. The cosmetic choices, you can revisit those later, but the structural ones I think are worth investing in. And for organizations and people working within smart home technology spaces, build with privacy as a design principle from the start and not a compliance checkbox at the end. So the robot and Frank problem is real, and the same system that supports someone is the same system that knows everything about them. And people will accept more technology in their homes when they trust that it would work for them. So trust is being built or eroded right now in the product decisions being made today. But of course, the security issue is so much bigger than just one person. So I get it. But for individuals, consider expanding your definition of home. If you're feeling like home is somewhere you haven't found yet, it might be worth looking at what your definitions of home actually is and wondering if you're needing to blur those boundaries a little bit. So what are the places within your city or town that actually feels like yours, even if you don't own them? The cafe, the park, the bookstore, or the walk that you always take. Start treating those places with the same care and intention that you'd give your own home. So show up regularly, learn the people, and let yourself belong to them. So belonging is not just something that happens within a building or within relationships. It's something you build through repetition, familiarity, and care. And the last one, which works at both a personal level and a collective one, be honest about what you actually want in a home, separate from what you were told you want, or separate from the home that you were raised in. This could be the large house as a sign of success, which is a dissolving idea anyways. And in that space, there is a real opportunity to ask, what would actually make you feel connected and that your life has room to breathe within? And I think that question is worth far more time than most of us give it. There is so much to this episode that I didn't get to, as always, but there are a few ideas worth considering and naming right now. So the future of co-living and how alternative ownership models might change not just affordability, but the way people relate to each other as neighbors. The mental health design of homes, which is its own deep conversation in itself, and something I want to come back to around home and identity, particularly for people who have always moved around or who don't have access to stable housing in the first place. That one's not finished, and that one requires community effort too. But this is where I keep circling around. We can build the most technologically advanced home imaginable. We can have it generate its own energy, manage its own climate, and predict its own maintenance. And none of that will make it feel like home unless the people within it feel like they belong there. So a home isn't something that you were just born into. It's something that you don't just find. It's something that you accumulate over time. So what is the future of homes? I guess it's up to you to find out. So if today's episode got you thinking, you can come and join your journey with us. We post nearly every day on Instagram. We share our inspirations for founders and future-facing leaders. It's a good place to stay curious. And if you're ready to go deeper, you can head over to our website at RobinsonHewitt.com. We work at the intersection of anthropology, emerging technology, and long-term systems change, helping future-facing leaders, founders, and businesses transform, evolve, and build the next era. If you're still orienting, we have so many free resources available to help you on your own founder's journey. But if you're ready to take the leap, you can check out our services as well. Make sure to subscribe to help build a better future for everybody. Everything is linked below, and I will see you in the next one. Ciao.